All right, so get this. We're diving deep into Kristin Hannah's The Women.
Oh, cool.
It's all about nurses, in the Vietnam War,
Okay.
which you don't hear a lot about, right?
Yeah, no, you do.
It's pretty fascinating stuff. So, picture this. You're a debutante
Okay.
in sunny San Diego, and all of a sudden, bam, you're in the middle of a war zone.
Wow.
That's exactly what happens to Frankie, the main character.
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you, I was hooked from page one.
I bet.
But I know what you're thinking, right? Another Vietnam War story.
Yeah.
Haven't we seen all the movies, read all the books?
Yeah.
And you'd be right, the beginning does have that familiar feel,
Right.
like a classic war story.
Yeah, it's almost like Kristin Hannah's playing with that,
Really?
that sense of familiarity, like she's giving a nod to Born on the 4th of July,
Right.
the things they carried, all those classics.
Yeah.
But then she takes it in a whole new direction.
So it's not just like a rehash of the same old story?
No, not at all.
What makes this one different then?
Well, think about it. Those classic war stories,
Yeah.
they mainly focused on men's experiences, right?
Right.
The women flips the script.
Okay.
It puts the spotlight on the women who were there, the nurses,
Yeah.
and their stories, which haven't really been told before.
So it's like we're seeing the Vietnam War through a whole new lens.
Exactly.
And at the center of it all is Frankie.
Yeah.
She goes through this amazing transformation.
She really does. She starts out as this sheltered debutante.
Right.
You can almost picture her, sipping tea at a garden party,
Totally.
completely oblivious to the realities of war.
And then her brother gets deployed,
Right.
and she decides to enlist.
Wow.
She wants to prove that women can be heroes too.
Of course.
It's not just about, following her brother. It's
Yeah.
about breaking free from those expectations and finding her own strength.
Exactly. But it's definitely not easy for her.
No, I bet not.
I mean, think about it. Vietnam in the 60s. A woman trying to make her mark in that world.
Yeah.
It was a man's world.
Oh, absolutely. She
Sure.
must have faced a ton of pushback.
Oh, for sure.
Did she have any support at all?
Oh, absolutely. She meets these amazing nurses and doctors
Okay.
who have seen it all,
Right.
and they recognize her potential. They see it in her.
Wow.
They become her mentors,
Oh, wow.
pushing her to be her best,
That's so powerful.
even when she doubts herself.
And Hannah's writing, it just pulls you right into that world.
Yeah.
It's so vivid. I could practically hear the helicopters
Oh, yeah.
and smell the napalm.
It's intense.
I can see why the article said she's a master at creating these immersive experiences.
One thing that stood out to me was how she uses those sensory details
Yeah.
to highlight the emotional impact.
Okay.
Like there's this scene where Frankie's performing a tracheotomy
oh, God.
during a mortar attack.
Oh, wow.
And that smell of napalm, it just hangs in the air,
Oh, man.
adding this layer of agency and fear. It's not just a medical procedure. It's a fight for survival.
Oh, wow.
You're right there with her,
Yeah.
feeling the pressure and chaos.
And then there's that other scene where Frankie is trying to comfort this dying soldier.
Oh, yeah.
And all she has is this old Beatles record.
Wow.
And she plays it for him.
That's beautiful.
It's this tiny moment of humanity
Yes,
amidst the brutality of war.
absolutely.
Gives me chills just thinking about it.
I know what you mean.
But the article also mentioned that the story kind of loses steam after Frankie comes home.
That's actually really common in war stories.
Really?
It's like that adrenaline rush of combat.
Yeah.
It ends, and then you're left with this void.
Right.
It's hard to adjust back to normal life
Right.
after experiencing something so intense.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what was it like for those women coming home, from Vietnam?
It's interesting you say that because women who served in Vietnam, they actually faced unique challenges.
Oh.
When they returned home, society wasn't quite sure what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you've been on the front lines saving lives
Right.
under incredibly difficult circumstances.
You'd think they'd be welcomed back as heroes.
You'd think so, right? But sadly, that wasn't always the case.
Oh, wow.
There was this unspoken expectation that they would just slip back
Yeah.
into their traditional roles as if nothing had happened.
As if they hadn't just lived through a war.
Exactly. Like their experiences weren't considered as valid
Right.
as the men's.
Wow.
It was a different time.
Yeah.
And the understanding of things,
Mm-hmm.
like PTSD, especially for women, just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So many of them came home carrying these invisible scars,
Oh, gosh.
the trauma, the
Yeah.
nightmares, the
It's
guilt.
heartbreaking. And I bet the lack of recognition
Absolutely.
just made it harder to cope.
For sure. They were dealing with the psychological impact of war, but also with this sense of being invisible,
Right.
their contributions being minimized.
Because the women doesn't shy away from that.
It doesn't.
It shows us what Frankie's life is like after the war.
It does. And it's something that resonated with me deeply. There's this one passage where Frankie's back in San Diego,
Okay.
and she's trying to explain what she saw in Vietnam to her friends.
Yeah.
And they just don't get it. They can't comprehend
Right.
the horrors that she witnessed.
Wow. I can only imagine how isolating that must have felt.
It is a major theme in the book, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It speaks to a larger issue of how veterans, especially women, struggled to find their place
Yeah.
back in civilian life.
Right.
They were forever changed by their experiences.
Of course.
But society wasn't always ready to acknowledge that change.
So it wasn't just about coming home. It was about trying to rebuild a life that felt totally different.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And The Women explores that struggle
Uh-huh.
with such sensitivity and depth. It doesn't offer easy answers or happy endings. It just lays bare the reality
Wow.
of what so many women went through.
And in doing so, it opens up this whole new conversation about the Vietnam War, doesn't it? It goes beyond the battles and the politics to the personal stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what's so crucial about books like The Women.
Yeah.
They remind us that history is not just dates and facts. It's about people.
Right.
Real people who lived, loved, suffered,
Yeah.
and ultimately found a way to survive.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? What other stories are out there waiting to be told?
Exactly.
How many perspectives have we overlooked or silenced?
It's a powerful reminder that there's always more to learn, more to uncover.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a novel like The Women
Right.
to shake us out of our complacency and make us see the world in
Yeah.
a new light.
It's like Hannah saying, hey, there's more to this story than you realize. And she
Exactly.
invites us to delve deeper,
Yeah.
to question our assumptions, and to listen to the voices that haven't always been heard.
Yeah, it really makes you realize that, history is so much more than just the big events.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about the, individual lives that were touched by those events, right? And I think that's one of the reasons this book, The Women,
Yeah.
it has the potential to resonate so deeply with readers today.
Yeah, I agree.
We're living in a time where there's so much focus on individual stories,
Right.
on amplifying voices that have been marginalized.
It's like we're finally starting to understand that everyone has a story to tell, and those stories matter.
Exactly. And Hannah, I think she taps into that perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
By focusing on the nurses' experiences,
Yeah.
she's shining a light on this group of women who were essential
Right?
to the war effort.
Yeah.
But their stories have often been overshadowed.
And the article mentioned how Hannah's own daughter,
Yeah.
who's part of, this younger generation,
Uh-huh.
was captivated by the story.
That's great.
And it really sparked her interest in the Vietnam War
Wow.
in a way that, traditional history books just hadn't.
Right. That's a great example of how powerful storytelling can be
Yeah.
when we connect with characters, on an emotional level. We're more likely to engage with the history they're living
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
It becomes less about dates and battles
Right.
and more about human experiences,
Right.
about empathy and understanding.
It's like those stories become a gateway to a deeper understanding of the past.
Exactly.
And in this case, it's a gateway to understanding the Vietnam War
Right.
through the eyes of women who were right there in the thick of it.
And not just the war itself,
Yeah.
but the lasting impact it had on their lives.
Right.
The Women doesn't shy away from the difficult realities
Yeah.
of coming home, the challenges of reintegration,
Right.
the invisible scars of trauma.
And I think that's something that resonates with readers
Absolutely.
on a very personal level.
Yeah.
Regardless of, whether they have a direct connection to the Vietnam War.
Right. We've all experienced loss, heartbreak,
Yeah.
the struggle to find our place in the world.
Exactly. And by reading about Frankie's journey, about the strength and resilience she discovers within herself. Yeah.
We're reminded that even in the darkest of times,
Yeah.
there's always hope.
Always.
There's always the possibility of healing and growth.
That's a powerful message.
And one that I think is especially relevant today.
Yes.
We're facing so many challenges as a society.
Sure.
And it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
But The Women, it reminds us that the human spirit
Mm-hmm.
is incredibly resilient.
It really is.
We have the capacity to endure, to overcome,
Yeah.
to find meaning even in the midst of suffering.
And that's a message I think we could all use a little more of these days.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into The Women,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a thought.
All right.
Frankie's story is just one of countless untold stories out there.
Right.
Stories of courage, resilience,
Mm-hmm.
and the power of the human spirit.
That's right.
What stories will you seek out? Whose voices will you amplify?
Good questions.
And how will you use your own experiences
Yeah?
to connect with the past and shape the future?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Keep learning.
and keep diving deep.